Welcome to the Blast Zone, the podcast where we dig up the bombs that shook Hollywood and try to find out why they went up in flames. This week, you hear fishy, fishy, fishy? This is In the Heart of the Sea. Welcome to the Blast Zone.
Welcome to the Blast Zone.
We are not a podcast about bad movies. We are a podcast about movies that did badly.
That's right.
I am Jon Drake, in-house film critic of my rarely updated Letterboxd account.
And I'm Ian Dukes. I'm a person with thoughts and feelings, and some of them are about movies.
Movies like In the Heart of the Sea, which we'll be talking about this week. But before we get into that, Ian, how are you doing this week?
Well, this week I moved a couch by myself.
I saw photographic evidence. It was a big couch.
It was kind of big, just love seat in length, but dual power recliner. So there's a lot of metal frame and motors inside. Adds to the weight. On one hand, I felt righteous after doing it, like I was able to get it moved without any help. On the other hand, I do feel a little bit broken. I am stiff and sore in some weird places, and it's going to take a few more days for those kinks to work out.
That's like a week's worth of exercise right there. Moving a couch by yourself is not just like a feat of strength, but also a feat of engineering to some degree because you have to calculate the width, the angles, you have to take the door frame off, do you have to do this and this?
There's really one big turn and doorway that I had to get through, and I went in kind of on faith. I'm like, it doesn't look like it's going to go through, but I'm just going to keep turning it and pushing on it until it does. And it did, thank goodness.
So the moral of the story is be persistent.
Yeah.
Don't give up.
That's a good moral for this week.
True.
Talk about some guys that needed to not give up.
I would have given up on like day 4 of the harrowing parts of this journey, but we're getting ahead of ourselves.
How was your week?
My week's been pretty low key. Call me Tom Hiddleston. But me and my wife went to New Haven on Sunday and just bopped around a little bit. That was real fun.
Bopping around is cool. I haven't bopped in a while.
Yeah, we bopped around. We went to some of our old favorite haunts from when we lived in New Haven, and that was just a good low-key time.
I like the sound of that.
Nothing exciting. But that's okay. You need that sometimes.
Consistency, normalcy, all good things.
Exactly. Before we get into the Heart of the Sea, I want to hear what you watched this week that you thought was cool.
If you follow Twitter like I do, you may know that in the last week, some writer for Slate Magazine wrote an article with the very hot take that Martin Short has never been funny. And a zillion people on the internet came to Martin Short's defense saying, actually, no, he's one of the funniest people there is. And so in the middle of that discourse, someone posted a funny scene from a movie that I'd never seen before. And that inspired me to go back and watch 1994's Clifford.
Did he play the dog?
He did not play the dog. There's no dog in this movie. This is not the big red Clifford. Oh. This is its own unique premise. Kind of a big premise. 40-year-old Martin Short plays a precocious and devious 10-year-old boy in this movie.
I assume you mean 40 at the time of filming, not currently.
Yeah. Martin Short's older than I thought. He was 40 in 94, if I did my math right.
Yeah.
Playing a 10-year-old, big sell in Hollywood to say, let's make this Martin Short movie. They paired him up with Charles Grodin, who plays his bachelor uncle, who's forced to look after the kid for a week. And when this movie came out, it did not do well. It bombed. It was panned. Roger Ebert hated it with a particular venom. So we're probably going to cover it at some point, but I thought I'd give a little preview.
Yeah.
I liked it. It had a lot of laughs. These are two of our greatest comedy actors. Both of them were at the top of their game back in 94 in this movie. So it wears you down. It's a big, sweaty, soggy premise, and it grinds on you, but it's funny. They're funny guys.
Yeah. I vaguely remember this movie. Wow, I hate that poster so much. I want to punch Martin Short on it. But I do remember when this movie came out. I never did see it. I was a big fan of another Charles Grodin film around this time, Beethoven, if you recall.
Oh, there's a big dog for you.
And Martin Short, I was very fond of The Three Amigos when I was really young.
Oh, yeah.
Way too young to watch that movie. And I do think that Martin Short is a talented comedian, but I'd be lying if I said I'm excited to watch this movie and cover it for the podcast. Also, it takes place in 2050. Why?
Oh, it starts with a flash forward.
Oh, that's the framing device. Okay.
Yeah. It's Clifford as an old man, and he's a little different than he was as a boy, and he gets to reflect on his childhood.
Is he still played by Martin Short?
Yeah.
That makes sense.
He works both ways. Talk about his talent as an actor. He works perfectly as a 70-year-old and as a 10-year-old in the same movie.
He's always been into like characters. He rarely plays the straight man. I think Inherent Vice was probably one of the most straightforward characters we've seen him play, and it wasn't straightforward at all. Was it Jiminy Glick was his big character that was like the Hollywood insider?
Yeah.
I enjoyed some of those clips, but some of them were grating.
Sometimes he's too much, and he is too much in this movie, but you got to go in with the right mindset. I could see why people would hate it. And I could see why I would hate it in a different headspace, but somehow rushing to the defense of Martin Short, I was ready to embrace it.
Yeah, I think the critic is clearly just trying to get clicks because the correct take is sometimes he works and sometimes he doesn't, which is true for most comedians, especially these kind of over-the-top comedians.
Yeah.
Speaking of over-the-top comedians, it's a great segue for my pick this week because I watched something near and dear to both our hearts, hopefully to our listeners as well. Our most recent guest, Mr. Django Gold, just released Bag of Tricks, his debut stand-up hour. It's a full hour. It's entirely free on YouTube. There's no reason not to go watch it. Yeah, it's quite good. I laughed heartily at many points. It's got a bit of the anti-humor Tim and Eric vibe at times. Like he gets into some absurd stuff, which I'm a big fan of, but also frames them in relatable ways. So definitely worth checking out if you're a stand-up comedy fan. It's been a good year for stand-up, I feel.
Yeah, this is exciting. I haven't seen it yet, but I'm really excited to check him out.
But we do have to get onto this week's topic, which is In the Heart of the Sea, a movie which is kind of topical for you. You've been deep into Nantucket fisherman lore lately. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
I have. With regards to this movie specifically, I had read the book that it's based on, also called In the Heart of the Sea, back in 2012. I was really into it. And I remember being a little bit enthusiastic hearing that a movie was coming out based on it. And I can't remember why I never watched it. Maybe I heard that it was bad, or maybe I just didn't want to relive the harrowing experience of the book, which recounts a pretty awful thing that happened to a bunch of people in lifeboats for 3 months. So,
including some whales, some pretty terrible things happened to them too.
Yes, lots of terrible things happened to whales. And that's what kept me away from reading the related book, which some people may have heard of, called Moby Dick, which is also referenced in this movie. This real life story inspired Herman Melville to some extent, or at least some of the stuff that transpires in Moby Dick. And I was always scared of that book, both because whaling is this barbarous, grotesque thing, and it's just very painful to read about the things being done to the whales, and because I was always intimidated by the book. I knew a couple quotes from it, and they were all very dark and imperious Ahab quotes from Hell's Heart, I Stab at Thee. And I'm like, this book is just too damn serious and too damn long. And then I picked it up, and it's really funny. It's really contemporary. It's about a guy from New York City who has depression and gets a job on a whaleboat to deal with his shit.
Hey, even my favorite slice of pizza can't cheer me up anymore. I got to go on this whaling boat.
Exactly. That's kind of the tone of most of the book, with little visitations by Ahab, who's this dark monster of a man. But the narrator, all his observations are funny, and it's a really fun book. So I was telling you about it, and you're like, hey, we got a movie lined up. I brought way too much baggage and background to this movie, and we'll deal with that as we pick the movie apart. But I'm glad to have finally seen it.
We'll have some nice differing perspectives because as entrenched as you are in this saga, both the fictional telling of it and the nonfiction telling of it, I am equally as uninvested. I've never read In the Heart of the Sea. I've never read Moby Dick. All I know about Moby Dick is from memes and tweets.
Yeah.
So, and the famous Ron Swanson quote, no symbolism, just a story about a man who hates a fish. But I do remember this trailer piquing my interest. But when it was released, we'll get into it. There's some other stuff going on at the movie theater.
Okay.
Right around that time. And also the reviews weren't super strong, but I did make a point to watch it as soon as it hit streaming. I think it went to HBO Max first or whatever, HBO Go at the time. And I was like, oh yeah, this movie. And I watched it and I liked it. I wasn't watching it with the most critical eye. It was, pardon the expression, something fun to put on in the background, which was like a 40-minute stretch of people just starving to death in this movie. So it's not the most fun time at the movies, but it's an adventure story. And so going back and rewatching it with a more critical eye was interesting to see maybe why the movie wasn't so warmly received. Because it wasn't just audiences that didn't turn out for this. It was also critics. They didn't hate it necessarily, but they didn't love it either. It was kind of a mixed bag, slightly skewed towards negative.
I can see why. It's going to be hard for me to get perspective because my advice at the top of this episode is don't be me, folks. I'm going to fact check the shit out of this movie because I just read way too much background and related material, and that's no way to enjoy a movie. This movie could have been really good, and that could have spoiled it for me. I think in the end, we'll probably both agree it's just kind of mediocre, and still my baggage is going to probably spoil it for me.
Is that Ian Dukes or Neil deGrasse Tyson over there? Like, actually, it couldn't have gone down like that because of
I got so many of those in my notes. I even deleted half of the ones I wrote down because I'm like, that is not worth bringing up, that little nitpick.
To be fair, I've read your notes and I agreed with most of them. There was just a handful of spots where I was like, actually, I see why they did that. Because you do have to Hollywoodize things to some degree, but maybe not to the degree which they did here.
It is a question of degree. And the debate, it's only a theoretical one. You go, oh, what if they had done it this other way? It's closer to the facts. That seems interesting enough to me, but doesn't mean it would have worked better as a movie. It's just throwing out ideas.
For a mass market audience, they have to think about what the best decision is. But it didn't work for that either because it's on this podcast. Do you want me to get into the story of the making of the movie?
Yeah, let's see how this thing happened.
All right. On August 12, 1819, the whaling ship Essex departed from Nantucket on a journey to the whaling grounds off the west coast of South America. Originally estimated to be a 2.5-year trip, everything went according to plan and the men were rich with oil. Just kidding. A big old sperm whale fucked their shit all up.
Dude, that's a Moby Dick move.
Cabin boy Thomas Nickerson, 14 at the time of departure, would write a manuscript in 1876 detailing his experience on the Essex, titled The Loss of the Ship Essex. Herman Melville had fuck all to do with it, by the way, considering Moby Dick was published over 20 years before Nickerson put pen to paper. Nickerson's manuscript would be lost until 1960 and first authenticated and published in 1984. Pretty Orwellian, if you ask me.
Oh, that could be a deep voice joke.
Yes.
American writer Nathaniel Philbrick, who was born in 1956 despite having a name that sounds like one of the sailors in this movie, would write and publish a book in May of 2000 based on Nickerson's account called In the Heart of the Sea, The Tragedy of the Whale Ship Essex. It also included bits taken from first mate Owen Chase's telling of the voyage, which actually did inspire large parts of Moby Dick. The book was a smash hit, selling well, and winning the 2000 National Book Award for nonfiction. Film studios also took notice, with Miramax planning an adaptation to be directed by Barry Levinson shortly after the release of the book. That fizzled out, however, and it wasn't until June 2012 when another attempt to adapt it would begin in earnest,
Know what I mean, Brian?
with Charles Levitt writing the screenplay and Chris Hemsworth being announced as Owen Chase despite no studio being attached yet. Eventually, a whopping 8 production companies would fund the movie, putting up a substantial $100 million budget. Warner Brothers would secure distribution rights, and reliable hand Ron Howard, fresh off of a hit with Chris Hemsworth in the lead with Rush, was brought in to direct.
He didn't.
Yeah, actually he did.
Filming began in September 2013 in London and at Warner Brothers Studios in Hertfordshire, England. The scenes, which took place in Ecuador and on Henderson Island, were filmed in the Canary Islands in Spain. To accurately portray the stranded and starving sailors, the actors were restricted to 500 to 600 calories per day. Hemsworth went from 215 pounds to 175 pounds, and Tom Holland went from 92 pounds to 34.
He didn't.
Filming went mostly without incident, a great rarity for a movie set at sea, and post-production would soon get underway on the effects-heavy film. Originally set for release on March 13, 2015, it was pushed back to December 11, 2015 to give it time to convert it into 3D. Yeah, 2015 was a weird time. Projected to gross $18 million its opening weekend, it would just put up $11.1 million, falling well short of expectations. Reviews were middling as well. At least there were no other big PG-13 action-adventure movies opening soon, which would steal the film's thunder, unless you count Star Wars The Force Awakens, the first theatrical Star Wars film in 10 years, which would gross $247 million in its opening week. In the Heart of the Sea was pretty much dead in the water at this point and was pulled from the vast majority of theaters. It's mostly forgotten now.
We remembered.
Remembered.
We remember. Yeah, we were talking off air about putting it up against Force Awakens, and I was like, but this movie's kind of more for adults, grown-ups, not Star Wars fans. And you're like, dude,
Star Wars fans are adults and grown-ups now.
they're fucking old.
Particularly the ones who were fans of the original trilogy were probably right around the age they thought the audience for In the Heart of the Sea would be.
Yeah.
And those fans, by and large, disliked the prequels. So this was like the first Star Wars movie they were excited to go see in theaters in 40 years.
Yeah, you're right.
And I saw The Force Awakens opening weekend, but I did not see In the Heart of the Sea.
No.
$247 million in a week is insane.
Yeah, that kind of eclipses everything. Even if this thing had been, I don't know, there's got to be room for more than one movie at the theaters because eventually people have seen the big one and they want to see something else. But this one just didn't have the juice to do anything.
Yeah, this movie, I went back, I rewatched the trailer before we recorded this. It's a good trailer. It hits all the right notes. It's intriguing. It shows a little bit of the whale, but not too much where it spoils it. Because let's get one thing out of the way. They nailed the whale.
The whale is cool. Maybe they should have done more whale. Maybe that's what they needed to do is emphasize the action CGI.
Just make it a straight up kaiju movie.
Because it kind of is. It's actually sneaky to the point where when the whale keeps showing up, I'm like, wait a minute, this is like a serious period drama. And now there's like monster movie whale action that they kind of shoehorned in. It almost didn't really fit the tone for me. What did you think?
Chris Hemsworth at one point in the most tortured Nantucket accent I've ever heard goes, "It's been following us," which is just real great unintentional comedy and reminded me of nothing more than Jaws 3: The Revenge, which featured a great white shark that somehow remembers the family that blew him up or like his relative from the first movie. I can't remember exactly, but I know there was a shark in that movie that definitely wanted some revenge. It's in the title.
Does it go after the chief's son or something? Is it like a generation?
I think it does. Yeah, I think it does.
Shit.
And I'm pretty sure that's where the famous Michael Caine quote comes from because he's in it, obviously. actually.
Oh,
He says,
okay.
I've never seen it, but I have seen the house it bought, and it's spectacular.
Good for him.
Quick note to the listeners, if you ever want to master the Michael Caine accent, just say the words "my cocaine."
My cocaine.
Congratulations, you're talking like Michael Caine.
That's awesome. Yeah, there's kind of no explanation. There's like a hand wave at Moby Dick, and there is no explaining. Okay, hold on.
No, they don't try.
This movie has a real live whale that's out for vengeance. Now, they hyped up the vengeance in a Hollywood kind of way, but this whale really did fuck up this whaling ship. You go, okay, did it know what it's doing? I don't know. I could believe so.
It makes sense. Big animal gets attacked. It's going to turn around and return the favor, perhaps.
But it comes out of nowhere. There is no family history with this particular whale. In Moby Dick, Ahab has his personal history with the whale, right? He lost his leg to it and he's going back out to get his revenge. But this is just the hero of this movie, Owen Chase. He runs into the whale and 2 minutes after he meets it, it smashes his ship and ruins his life.
And I actually give the movie credit for going that route because it's the less Hollywood way about it. It's just an animal acting like an animal. But then it tries to add some magical element to it, I guess.
Yes.
I think it'd be really funny if they just kept writing sequels to Moby Dick, and every time Ahab went out to get him, he would lose another limb till eventually he's just like a head on a stick.
Moby Stick.
Moby Stick. There we go. Yeah, the whale, scary. It's not your Vineyard Vines polo whale.
No.
It's a mean motherfucker. He's got some jagged looking teeth and
It's mean, it's scarred, it's mottled with this white color across it, but it looks really weather beaten and scarred, and it's like it's been through some battles. And that's just a hint of like, this whale's been through some shit, and that's why he's so mad.
right. And I do like what they did here. He's not pure white. He's dark gray with spots of white. Actually, you could see Moby Dick on my wall. Do you see him?
I see a white whale. There she blows.
That's Leviathan by Mastodon. I have the vinyl hanging on my wall.
Oh,
'cause
okay.
I love that cover. And the whole album is based on Moby Dick, actually.
Oh, neat. That's a more traditional rendering of Moby Dick as a pure white creature, which makes him cartoony and friendly looking.
Right. He looks like just a really big beluga.
Yeah.
I want to shout out the one shot of this movie that really blew me away is when the harpooned whales, the family is diving, and I guess we'll just call him Moby Dick, is coming up the other way towards the sailors. Like, that was such a good shot. And you get his like saw-like teeth that are all yellow on his bottom jaw. It's like very, any scene with the whale in it, I was pretty much captivated.
Yeah, sperm whales are just freaky as shit, and they are captivating, especially when they're 85 feet long, which don't exist in the wild anymore. But
did they? Would they actually got that big?
There's some debate. I was just reading about that in the Philbrick book. Some modern day whale experts think that's unrealistic, but there's lots of credible accounts from the whalers of that period. And we know how much they hunted specifically male bull whales because those were the most lucrative.
So they hunted the bigger whales, and maybe that caused kind of a forced evolution.
Yeah, no one's seen ones that big since, but I believe it that there were ones that big because the difference is they think that maybe they top out at 65 feet and this one was supposed to be 85, but that's easy to imagine 100, 200 years ago. That could totally exist.
That's pretty freaky. I thought it was more of just a exaggeration, but that's rad.
Yeah.
This movie might not be great, but it did make me want to learn more about this period in history. And so I might actually pick up the book and give it a read.
The Philbrick book is fantastic. If you're inspired by what was Nantucket like, what was whaling like, what was sailing like, it's full of all that detail. And strangely, so is Moby Dick. So Moby Dick is like a hugely long book because for every chapter that advances the plot forward, there's 2 or 3 chapters where he's just explaining some fact of the world about whaling, about ships, about the taxonomy of whales. That like the narrator, who is a very thinly veiled version of Herman Melville, just teaches you everything about whaling while you're in the midst of this dramatic journey.
Interesting.
Yeah. Cool book.
Oh, yeah. They might have a shot at becoming popular one of these days. Should we get into the plot of the movie so we can start walking people through the events we've been tiptoeing around?
Yes, there's a lot to get into. Here we go. The year is 1850, and author Herman Melville, played by Ben Whishaw, has tracked down the last living survivor of a legendary nautical catastrophe. With great reluctance, old Thomas Nickerson, played by Brendan Gleeson, agrees to tell the writer his harrowing tale. We begin in the year 1820, and the whaling ship Essex is about to depart from Nantucket. An ambitious sailor named Owen Chase, played by Chris Hemsworth, is offered the position of first mate. But he's mad about that because he really wanted to be captain. But that job goes to George Pollard, played by Benjamin Walker, the son of a prominent Nantucket whaling captain. Also among the crew is the second mate, Matthew Joy, played by Cillian Murphy, and a young green hand named Thomas Nickerson, this time played by Tom Holland. Soon after they set sail, Chase proves his worth by whipping the green crew into shape, and Captain Pollard proves his inexperience by sailing the ship into a squall, which heavily damages their sails and their gear. Afterwards, the captain wants to turn around and go back to Nantucket, but at Chase's urging, they agree to push on and try to complete their whaling mission.
Yeah, that was like day 2, right? They were on, like,
Yeah, it happened fast in real life, but I like how quickly it comes in the movie. They don't spend a lot of days at sea. It kind of jumps quickly into the action, which was one thing I had to say in favor of the movie.
it does kind of make the tragedy even more tragic because they were just a couple days journey to Nantucket and they could have fixed up the ship, got some more whale boats, and then been on their way, and maybe they would have had better luck.
Maybe. I don't know if it made a big difference. It wasn't a good start. It definitely made the crew shit their pants because like the ship almost capsizes. I'm not sure if that comes across in the movie.
It does, yeah. On my second watch, I started realizing like how close they actually were to sinking at that moment because they have to cut away some sails to get the ship upright again.
Exactly, yeah.
There was quite a bit of maneuvering that went into just staying alive.
Yeah.
And you do see some of their smaller whaling boats go flying or break.
Yeah, and you need a lot of whaling boats. One of the things you learn about whaling is that it chews up the boats because it's these little 12-foot long rowboats that they put down to actually go harpoon the whales, which seems ridiculous in itself. And it is because they get totally smashed constantly during a
Yeah, they get
whaling
fucked
voyage.
up in these things.
Yeah, a big whale just flips its fluke at you. Even if you're successfully harpooning and killing him, he can easily smash your boat while you're
Even
doing it.
unintentionally, just by thrashing around, he could really fuck your shit up. Yeah.
A slight bit of thrashing. These creatures are so massive and so powerful. They're constantly putting their whaleboats back together. I mean, like the carpenter and the blacksmith on a whale ship are two of the busiest people.
Is there a guy who just stays on the main boat and is like, yeah, because that's the only job I would ever even consider?
There is a guy like that. His name is Pip in Moby Dick, and he's one of the saddest characters because he loses his mind.
Because he can't go out whaling?
Because he tried once and he was a coward and he jumped off the boat when the whale came. And then he dissociates after that and he's just fucked up in the head. He's a very sad little guy.
But they keep him around?
They keep him around because Ahab takes a liking to him in his sad state.
That's pretty wild. So we did jump around a little bit there. But let's go back to the beginning. We start with, I think what we both agree is the weakest part of the movie, which is this completely absurd framing device where Herman Melville shows up at, I like that you called him Old Thomas Nickerson. It sounds like his nickname. Shout out to Yucky Tom on Twitter, our buddy Old Tom. But yeah, Old Thomas Nickerson. Brendan Gleeson, one of my favorite actors.
Fantastic actor, yeah.
So good.
Barely survives this movie.
Barely. Like and Michelle Fairley is, I feel like everyone in this section, both Ben Whishaw, who's been good in other stuff, Brendan Gleeson, who's fantastic, and Michelle Fairley, who's turned in some really strong performances.
Yes.
They all seem to be playing it kind of like a stage play to me, like a little overdone, a little exaggerated.
Yeah, in a movie where a lot of stuff is overdone, and that's probably going to be my main thing that I keep harping on. This is the most sort of stage.
More like harpooning on.
I wish I could harpoon it and rein it in, but yeah, it's real stagey. It's real over dramatized. Ben Whishaw is just being a brooding author for no particular reason. Like Herman Melville is a character in this movie, and he kind of doesn't have any personality. He's kind of just like a meek supplicant to this old sailor who he's trying to get the story from, but it doesn't make sense. And it gets way worse if you know the truth, like you alluded to already. The real world timeline is nonsense trying to shoehorn Melville in here because the other survivor, Owen Chase, the Chris Hemsworth guy, survived, and he published his complete account 4 months after he got home. Like he didn't wait 20 years and have to dig it out of an old man in a boarding house and be the only person who knew it. It was
out there, yeah.
It was out there. According to Phil Brick, every school child in America knew the story of the Essex. It was just like popular lore because it was such a gripping tale.
It makes sense. It's like how we learned about the Challenger or something like that. Or even 9/11, like just great disasters in American history. I'm sure it was taught. So yeah, it's a little weak. It's a little bit, it reminded me a little bit of Dewey Cox. At times, Melville's just like, I'm writing my masterpiece, but it tortures me. Like he's...
Exactly. It has that overwrought thing that Dewey Cox was definitely making fun of in biopics.
So then we go back to Nantucket in 1820. We meet Mr. Owen Chase, and then we meet the crooked businessmen that are hiring him here. These guys are such dickbags. They're so clearly untrustworthy.
Yeah.
I hated these motherfuckers right away. One of them is Maester Lewin from Game of Thrones.
Oh, that's right. We have Caitlin Stark and Maester Lewin.
Yep. What is going on out front there? It seems like people are taking bets. Is that like the whale stock market?
I guess so. I couldn't make sense of that either. There's a scene that's like a lot of things in this movie feels like a Hollywoodized version to quickly get you up to speed on how valuable whale oil is and what a big booming industry this is. And the Hemsworth character walks into this thing where a bunch of guys are yelling and there's a chalkboard and they're going, hey, yeah, new world record for whale oil or something. But
it's like, why are these guys cheering for that if they have no... Shouldn't you be out on a boat then if you're that excited about how expensive whale oil is now? Not standing here, not making any money?
Yeah, I don't know what they're exactly doing.
And then, so how did you find that the early 19th century Nantucket looked?
I was excited to to see it because I'd been reading all this related material. I'm like, oh, let's try to visualize what I was picturing in my mind. And it's somewhat satisfying. The CGI in Nantucket looks a little fakey, but I was like, I'm okay with it because I do like to see recreations of America in older times.
It reminded me a lot of a Muppet Christmas Carol.
Oh, there you go.
But I think a lot of it may not have even been done with CGI. There's some spots, particularly by Chase's house, when he's like arguing with his wife about going back out, where it looks like the background might be matte paintings, which isn't really done much anymore.
You're right. It has that painterly look to it, which I wasn't sure was good or bad. That makes it feel more romantic than maybe the movie ends up being. Because yeah, that Nantucket, when you saw it like across the bay and the house is on the other side of the water, I was like, that's neat. But also it's like, doesn't feel as real as I wanted it to feel.
And that's fine if you're consistent, but then there's other scenes where they go for realism and it goes back and forth. It tries to have it both ways.
Yeah, it does this other thing. So as soon as they get on whaleboats, you're like, okay, there's a lot of CGI going on here. Everybody's hair has like a halo of golden sunshine around it, which is this thing that makes me think of Disney live action, although I can't point to a specific movie that has that look.
Beauty and the Beast, I think, did that a little bit.
There's a lot of lens flares, and then when they're on the water, there's a lot of water drops on the camera look, which is like a way to give you that like immersive feeling of you're right there on the boat, but like there's no movie cameras in the 1800s. So what is it actually giving you the feeling of?
Yeah, Ron Howard gets, he gave us the whale POV. He gave us the Jason Bourne shaky cam at times. He's pulling out all the stops, pulling out all his camera tricks for this one. It's kind of like a choppy way to make a movie because, pardon the expression, but there's just not a lot of consistency in the filmmaking, I thought.
No, and some of those shots are striking. There's like fisheye lenses at the end of yard arms and like interesting perspectives from the deck of the boat, but they are just kind of thrown in there. And it's okay that I got a good glimpse of the boat, which is something I wanted to see, but it is kind of a jumble.
I didn't have a good handle on how big this boat was. Like we only get kind of the main, what is that room called?
The hold?
Yeah, the hold. And we see the captain's quarters, but we don't know where the rest of these fucking guys sleep. I don't know if that's worth pointing out, but I don't know, that type of stuff interests me.
I know you could go a lot more hardcore, and I feel like I couldn't help but think of Master and Commander a lot, which I feel gave us a much more real, you were there version of being on a sailboat under similar conditions.
That's a borderline future episode. We could probably pull that off.
Oh, really?
Oh, it made $211 million on a $150 million budget. We could definitely do Master and Commander.
Oh, we're doing it. We're coming for you. Oceans are battlefields, folks.
We do a lot of swashbuckling movies. You're right.
They don't do well. I guess that's the lesson is don't get on a boat with a camera. You're going to lose money.
It's true. Except Pirates of the Caribbean.
Okay, sorry.
It's the one exception.
Yeah, that taught Hollywood the wrong lesson.
Anywho.
Speaking of shaky and jumbled, let's talk about their accents in this movie.
Let's make fun of some people. Because Benjamin Walker is the only American actor in the entire main cast, as far as I could tell.
Oh, that's right. I didn't even realize that, but you're right.
Famous stand-up comedian Benjamin. Do you know he's a stand-up comedian?
I did not know that.
He obviously does acting as well, but his first love is comedy. I would not have guessed that from his performance in this. He doesn't have a lot of he plays like a doofus sometimes, and that's kind of fun.
He plays the dour, self-important, serious guy who fucks up and regrets it.
But his Nantucket accent is passable, but he's American, so I give him less credit for that, even though I think he's from Georgia originally. But then Cillian Murphy nails it. He's kind of an accent master, right?
He's so good, and he's just an excellent actor, so he's convincing, and he's in too small a part. That was my problem with him in this, because every time he pops up, he's really good. I'm like, wow, he gives the movie weight, and it feels real, and then that weight kind of flies away on the wind. Not to disparage Chris Hemsworth, who we find very appealing, but his accent is, whoa boy.
He's never had a handle on accents. It's kind of getting embarrassing at this point, but he's not a bad choice for the character of Chase overall, because he's supposed to be this kind of man's man, came up from nothing, and he's just a real adventure seeker. The men respect him. He takes no shit, but he's fair. That's all stuff you can see Hemsworth doing really well.
Yeah, he pulls that off.
Holland, also good as a little kid. He's just a little guy, little baby man. This was pre-Spider-Man, so he was kind of a known actor, but not really yet. I don't buy him growing up into Brendan Gleeson, but you do.
Yeah, we disagreed on that point. I was looking at Brendan Gleeson, and then we meet Tom Holland. I'm like, wait a minute, is that the same guy? And I looked it up. And I'm like,
do you think it's the same actor?
No, but I meant to say, because it's not clear at first which one is him, the old man. You're looking for him when you flash back, right? I go, oh, wait, that's Tom Holland, is the Gleeson character. And then they went back to Gleeson's face. And I'm like, oh, I can picture it. Put on a big beard and get old, and maybe he'll look like that.
It's not distractingly bad, but I guess because we have Donald Gleeson now.
Oh, yeah.
It kind of ruins it. And I know what young Brendan Gleeson would look like. He's right there. But Cillian Murphy rocks it in this movie. I would have liked to see him in a bigger part. I don't think he would have been the right choice for Chase, though.
No, he has a wounded stoicness that wasn't what the Chase part called for.
He could have been the haunted Spanish captain.
But yeah, he was perfect for this role because he has to surrender to his wounds and his hunger later on. And it's incredibly effective. It's really good, but it's just a few scenes where he gets to show off.
And then you had kind of a central general idea around this movie that we've touched on a little bit, but did you want to dive in?
Yeah, it already came up. But one of the first things I wrote down as I was first watching through this movie, I was like, is there such a thing as over dramatizing a true story? And my answer was probably yes. It feels very heavy handed. And obviously, once you know what the true facts are and where exactly they deviated and what they did. But I'm thinking, you can tell me from your perspective of not having all that background, there's all these dramatic moments. I mean, starting with that Melville thing, which we already went through. But Owen Chase is like getting wall punching mad when he doesn't make captain. And there's like all this drama that seems overinflated. It just doesn't feel real, like how people would behave.
There were parts of it that I was okay with and other parts that I thought were just kind of shoehorned in to be annoying. Like the whole drama between Pollard and Chase, because Pollard's family is a famous whaling family and seafaring people, and Chase is a landsman's name. Oh, like you're a like you all fucking live on land, dickhead.
Yes.
You're not Robert Downey Jr. at the end of Zodiac. You don't live on a fucking houseboat.
That's true.
So that felt a little played up just for the audience's benefit. I didn't think it rang true, but then the other stuff, punching a wall or this kind of dramatically climbing the rigging to fix a sail, I was okay with that stuff because it is a movie and you need to keep the audience's attention, and sailing's pretty boring most of the time, I would say.
One of the things that comes up in the book is most of the crew is green. This was in fact Pollard's first outing as a captain, and it was really hard to get your pick of experienced sailors because there's constantly boats hiring. So he got some shitty guys. He had a really green crew, and it was Chase's job to whip him into shape. And so they had to figure out how to show that in the movie in a tight, timely way. And him jumping up the rigging and fixing a problem with the sail, I thought that was a fairly effective way to communicate that. And I do agree that then they just went over the top with Captain Pollard. He's just being a total dick to Chase. And then he's being a total nonsensical asshole sailing the ship into a squall, which seems totally foolish. And then the moment the squall hits, he's like, oh my God, take the sails down. This is fucked up. And it's like, who is this guy supposed to be that acts like this? I couldn't reconcile it with anything but a guy whose job was just to create drama.
So there is a scene early on when do we even get the names of the businessmen that are hiring them?
We probably did, but I didn't.
They do shake their hands and be like, I'm Mr. Peters. Who gives a fuck?
Yeah.
Maester Lewin is talking to Chase, and Chase is like loudly protesting. I don't want to go out there with some rich little green boy who doesn't know shit about a boat. And Pollard can hear them.
Yes.
And he almost has a look on his face of, yeah, I get it. He seems like self-aware in that moment. But then once they're at sea, he drops it. But then once that conflict is resolved, he drops that again. Like now he's back to being kind of like,
yeah.
It's just they had to shoehorn in this drama, but it didn't make sense with his character.
And I guess that's a difficult thing to write, that kind of thorniness between guys without making one guy a total rich fop and the other one an incredibly capable hero. To make them both capable, which they were in real life. Like the irony for me was Pollard was first mate of that ship on a whole bunch of successful outings before he became captain. They promoted the captain and gave him a new ship that just got built that was much bigger. And so in real life, he had totally earned that spot. He was been first mate on a bunch of successful voyages. And Chase had been the harpooner, which is one level down from being a mate. So he wasn't due to become captain. Pollard had totally earned his bones to become captain, but they had to make it exaggerated for the Hollywoodization of the story.
Yeah, at least Ron Howard never gave any interviews where he said that he really tried to avoid dramatizing the story too much.
Yes. Right before we taped, I pointed out this video that comes up on IMDb after you watch the trailer where Ron Howard, he has a great history of a bunch of successful adaptation movies, starting with stuff like Apollo 13. On that movie, Tom Hanks pushed me. He's like, we don't have to Hollywoodize this. And he wrote himself a note on his script. Just show it. All you have to do is show the real stuff and people will get it. He's like, if audiences know it's based on truth, they're more accepting. But if you fictionalize, they think it's Hollywood hokum. And Ron Howard fell down on that part of the job.
Yeah. Also, Hollywood hokum. Good alternate name for this podcast, maybe.
Yeah, we could have called it Hollywood hokum. That would have been catchy.
All right, you ready to walk through the middle of the movie?
Yeah, why don't you tell us what happened next?
The Essex kills their first sperm whale, and young Tom Nickerson is initiated into the carnage of the whaling business as they butcher it and make him crawl inside the skull to scoop out the precious spermaceti. Is that like fettuccine?
Yeah, it's like biscotti.
But overall, the hunting is poor, and they sail both coasts of South America without much success. Then, while stopping in Ecuador, a Spanish captain gives them a tip and a warning. Far to the west in a remote stretch of the Pacific, there's an offshore ground teeming with sperm whales. But in that place, there also lives a demonic white whale who killed 6 of the Spanish captain's crew. Pollard and his officers mock the man's sad story and head straight for the offshore ground, where they are suddenly surrounded by dozens of whales. But no sooner do they take to their whaleboats when the fabled white whale strikes. The enormous creature plows his gigantic head right into the Essex, staving in the hull and leaving the ship to sink. The surviving sailors scavenge some makeshift sails and grab what provisions they can from the sinking ship before it goes under. Now aboard 3 tiny whaleboats with scant food and water, the men set sail for the coast of South America, some 3,000 miles away. Damn, they were really out in the middle of fucking nowhere.
Yeah. There's a great irony in the actual real story was Pollard wanted to make for Tahiti. He thought that Tahiti wasn't too far in the other direction. And the rest of the men voted him down because there were a lot of stories about cannibalism in the native peoples of the particular Polynesian islands. And so they're like, no, we're going to get eaten if we go there. So they turned the other way and tried to go basically 10 times as far. If they would have sailed the other direction, they probably would have made land in a short while and been fine.
Was there any truth to the rumors of cannibalism in Tahiti?
Definitely not to the extent that they were worried about. Part of the irony of the real history, I think, was that shortly afterwards, some other sailors opened up trade to some of these islands, which had all these sort of myths and legends around them and kept people away. And then they started going there and they
realized it was probably fine.
They're like, yeah, these people are fine and we can totally exploit them and ruin their futures.
You see a little bit of that in the Ecuador scenes where they're trying to trade whale oil that these people don't fucking need for goods and whatever. But should have sailed to Tahiti because guess what? People got eaten anyway.
Yeah, one way or another, someone's going to eat you.
Spoiler alert. Okay. What I wanted to say about whaling is it reminds me a lot of Killing Dragons and Reign of Fire.
Okay.
Because it seems fucking impossible to kill one whale.
Yeah.
So we get a pretty cool extended sequence of them capturing their first whale. Not capturing, they stab it right in the head and kill it. And it's intense and the whale dives and they almost run out of rope, which would have dragged the boat under. So they almost lose the whale, but they get him. But I'm like, it takes 2 boats with 10 men each on them, hours probably to row out to this fucking thing. They got to get the harpoon. They got to land a shot. They got to tire the whale out so it dies. And they got to fucking somehow get it back to the boat. And they need to get 2,000 barrels of oil to hit their quota. And one sperm whale, one adult male sperm whale, produces about 34 barrels of whale oil.
Oh, okay. You got facts.
Which means they'd have to do this 60 fucking times.
Yeah.
To get enough whale. Like, that seems impossible. Where are they going to keep all this shit?
Yeah, somehow they did it. When you start to learn the details of the actual whaling, it's like, who would try that? That's too difficult. Just the fact of getting the whale back to the ship, stripping all of its skin off, and then they boil it down. They build these giant boiling pots onto the deck of the ship so that they can boil all the blubber down and basically turn it into its final product and then put it in casks and put it in the hole. And that way you don't have to be dragging whole whales or big chunks of whale meat around and it keeps forever. But it's utterly ridiculous. They have 3 years worth of beef, biscuits, and food and stuff in the hold. And as the ship goes on, they basically slowly eat up the food and replace all of it with whale oil. But it's just this ridiculous thing. It's a floating murder factory, but it's like a real factory on the water.
It's a floating slaughterhouse, essentially. It's nuts.
Yeah. And it runs for 3 years straight with almost no breaks. They do go to port and they sometimes reprovision in ports and stuff. And occasionally they'll offload some of their casks of oil to be shipped back if they call it a good friendly port for that. But it's kind of ridiculous. It's like, why would people do this? And I don't know, it just shows you the hard-headedness and the ingenuity of people pursuing money and getting ahead at all stages of history. People figure out how to make really insane sounding stuff work, even at great expense to themselves.
Yeah, as repugnant as the practice of whaling is, it's just impressive in how they came up with a system that seemed to work fairly well, at least for 100 years close to.
It's wild.
But that was my main theory about how this movie is similar to Reign of Fire.
Yeah, because you're like, how are they going to do this over and over to actually clear the world of dragons or whales? But eventually we cleared the world of both.
Oh, and Chase is like, we got to get him at the magic hour. They can't see so good. And it's like they're underwater, dude. They can't see anywhere. So then let's talk about this Ecuador port. Looks lovely. I think it's the Galapagos Islands they landed on. There used to be people there before it was just a nature preserve.
No, I think they also landed in the Galapagos Islands, which is some chapters from the Philbrook book that didn't make it into the movie. They actually took on 150 tortoises to slaughter and eat for themselves.
No!
The deck was covered with tortoises actually at the time they ran into Moby Dick, which is weird.
Did the tortoises eat any of the guys in the water?
They should have. That would have been cinematic. I don't know.
Yeah.
They decided
tortoise attack.
That would be hard to portray. But yeah, the Galapagos I think have always been super weird. Just the way they showed up in Master and Commander as well. Super barren, strange creatures and nothing else.
Yeah. So they must have landed in like Quito or one of the port cities in Ecuador.
Yeah, one of the Spanish colonial cities.
But they come up with the Spanish captain and you called this out. They're pretty mean to him.
So mean. Especially the screenwriters made Mr. Joy do it, the Cillian Murphy character, who's been the voice of reason. He's like the calming loving friend to the hot-headed Mr. Chase. But for some reason, Mr. Joy just fucking lashes out at the Spanish captain who just told him this really sad story of woe. He lost so much crew to this white whale. And Joy goes, oh, did this white whale dance a little jig?
And pick your pocket too, or something like that.
Yeah.
And
He's like, why are you being that way?
maybe because the Spanish captain asked them to buy him a drink.
Oh,
but,
rude.
You know, like, Mr. Joy, you're not living up to your name there, bud. More like Mr. Mean.
Yeah.
Mr. Meanie Pants.
Yeah, and he's a second mate too. Like, why is he mouthing off to a captain? That feels inappropriate.
Right. Even across ships, you respect the rank. Even if it's not your captain, it's still a captain. Seems super fucked up. Even though the Spanish captain does look like Alec Baldwin with a beard.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
You might be tempted to mock him or
Right.
his wife, his pretend Spanish wife.
She's Spanish. Yeah. You guys couldn't see I was doing air quotes.
Okay.
There's no video here. Yeah. His Spanish wife.
But yeah, it's good foreshadowing. You know something scary is waiting for them. And then they also that they're getting desperate. They have to go there because they're not meeting their quota. So they're headed for a showdown.
Is it good foreshadowing? Because I feel like it would have been, but the whale attack literally happens like 5 minutes later. It's like,
Yeah.
You could have built up the dread a little bit more, you know?
Yeah, the movie, what's interesting about the true story is it kind of has these two whole sections to it. And you'll see that Act 3, the way we broke it down, is way longer than Act 2. Usually most of the action's in Act 2, but we kept the Moby Dick attack in Act 2. And then there's a whole other chapter to this adventure of shipwrecked men at sea, which is kind of its own story. So yeah, the movie does have to kind of move fast, but I was grateful for the fast pace that we went from one adventure to the next. And all of a sudden, hey, the big whale's attacking. I was thrilled that was already happening.
Yeah, I will give the movie credit. It's an over 2 hour movie, just barely. I think it's 2 hours, 2 minutes maybe. But it doesn't even feel that long. It moves pretty fast. It's got a good pace.
It does draw you along. I noted that on both watches. I'm like, you know what? I got to give it
on
credit.
purpose. You fucking.
It harpoons you and it drags you along on a Nantucket sleigh ride, as they call it.
I did like that term. It looked fun if it wasn't for the fact that you're in the middle of the ocean.
Yeah.
You know, like I do that shit on a jet ski right by the pier, but not out in the middle of the ocean. We talked about it a little bit already, but was there anything about the first whale attack that we wanted to call out here?
I think this is where the CGI worked the best. We already started to talk about how cool the whale himself looks. There's a couple great overhead shots when the whale is actually ramming into the front of the ship. That really helps set the scale. It's way bird's eye view looking down on the ship, and you can see how big the ship is and how big the whale is and how he's really pushing it and the ship is tilting over. And I definitely crave that to be like, what would it be like if the whale hits a ship? How does that even work? And the movie did a nice job of showing you just what the good stuff.
The CGI at sea is overall pretty great.
Yeah.
Even like, again, we're calling him Moby Dick for lack of a better term, but the non-Moby Dick whales also look great. Even the dolphins that are breaching as they're rowing out to the whales look pretty good. I didn't have any complaints about the CGI in this movie. They made good use of the budget.
No, it does seem like they spent the money in the right places.
Okay, so you want to walk us through the end of the movie?
Okay.
Or row us?
Here we go. After many days adrift in the open ocean, the castaways catch sight of an island and make for land. Suddenly, they realize that the white whale has been following them. He thrashes the shit out of their boats, but they manage to make it ashore. Unfortunately, after some time, they realize there's not enough plant or animal life on this island to sustain them. A very sick second mate Joy and 3 of the other men decide to stay behind, but the rest of the men return to their boats and sail on. One of the 3 boats then gets separated and is never seen again. And after many more weeks without food, sailors on both remaining boats begin to die. And in order to survive, the others make the terrible decision to eat the flesh of their fallen comrades. Chase comes face to face with the white whale for a 3rd time, but he has a change of heart about killing it and he lowers his harpoon. It swims away. After about 90 days adrift, the boats containing Owen Chase, George Pollard, and Tom Nickerson are finally rescued. The starving men are nursed back to health and are returned to Nantucket. And back at home, the whale ship owners urged Chase to tell the official inquest that the Essex ran aground in order to not spook and destabilize the whole whaling industry. But he refuses to lie. Inspired by Chase, Captain Pollard also tells the truth about the white whale that sunk their ship. And decades later, having revealed his story for the first time, old Thomas Nickerson can rest easy knowing his wife still loves him and that Herman Melville's writing career has been secured.
I love when Ian gets sassy in his synopsis. He can rest easy knowing Herman Melville's writing career.
That's kind of the point. In the middle of this section, the Melville character has his big moment where he breaks down. He's like, you got to tell me the story. I'm finished as a writer if I don't make this book kick ass. ass. And Brendan Gleeson starts crying. He's like, no, I'll do it for you. Don't worry.
And then he tries to give him his money back. When did you guys become bro? I was like, but then they spent all night drinking and just talking. And I was like, yeah, that's how bros happen.
And then at the end, they're just joking like old buddies.
I'd love to spend a night just drinking whiskey with Brendan Gleeson.
Yeah. And making little ship in a bottle models.
No, I don't want to do that. That sounds boring. I don't have the dexterity for that.
No.
So we got to talk about it. Whale attack number 2 pretty much kicks this section off.
The whale comes back. I did not expect that because that didn't happen in real life.
Wait, the whale didn't follow them out of some, like, who's defending these offshore grounds now? He's pretty much like the protector of the offshore grounds, but he's left his home.
Yeah.
To go chase these fuckers.
He's really hot about Chris Hemsworth. And he's like, I got to deal with this one dude.
Kick the shit out of this guy.
And it happens in such a surreal way. They're like, oh, there's land. We're about to go ashore. And the whale jumps out practically out of the surf.
Surprise, bitch.
And I'm like, I honestly thought for a minute that this was going to be a fever dream of Chase, that he was already sick from hunger. And there was going to be like a snap to reality and they were going to just be washing ashore. But no, they really had the whale chase them down and try to get him again. I'm
of two minds about this scene because I agree it's ridiculous and silly for the whale to have followed them this far. It stands to reason they've been floating for quite some time.
It's far enough. It's many days and they're not doing anything anymore. They're just sort of languishing in a boat.
Right. Drift. They're not trying to do anything. They're just where the wind takes us. So I think if the movie had just been them floating till they found rescue or till they started dying off, it might have been a little underwhelming. So I understand the desire for a second whale attack, but maybe it should have happened sooner after the first because we get the sense that it's been like a couple weeks at least. Like when they throw in this element of the whale's been chasing them, or not even chasing them because they're not moving fast, like stalking them essentially.
Yeah.
Lying in wait till they're about to find some shelter to...
Yeah, like what's the whale's reasoning why he didn't sink those boats a week ago and just do away with those guys and be done with it? He waited till they had hope. Like he's a specifically demonic kind of whale where he's, wait, I'm going to let them get inside of land and they're going to think they're okay and then I'm going to fuck them up.
Yeah, and they do call it a demon at times.
They do.
The Spanish captain calls it a demon, but it doesn't ring true to a story that's tried to be grounded up to this point. I'm okay with a second whale attack. I'm just not okay with the way it went down.
And I think there was an in-between method. There was actually a scene where they're wrangling their little boats through another storm and you just see the whale high underwater, right? Isn't there like a one shot? And I'm like, that leaves it open to question. Is the whale really there? Is the trauma haunting these men? Is it just the fear of the whale? But when it comes out and he literally shouts, hey, there's that whale. He's been following us. It went over the top into kind of silly.
Then there's the, should we talk about Whale Attack 3 now since we're kind of on this topic?
We can wrap up the whale attacks because they're kind of just incidental. They don't change the story. They're just thematic attacks.
So after they set off the island, the men that decided to go back out onto the sea again to try to find their way home, they see the whale a third time. They toss Chase his jerry-rigged harpoon made of like bamboo and
some stuff they hammered together on the island improbably.
But he says, no, I'm not going to do it. And the movie seems to be telling us the whale was testing him and he passed. So now I will let you go. But I'm like, he probably didn't want to stab the whale because he didn't want the whale to get pissed and fucking kill him. Yeah. You know, they're in these rinky ass little whale boats that are just patched beyond belief. They're taking on water anyway already.
The guys are nearly dead from starvation and thirst. The whale is inches away from their boat and the captain is like, stab it, stab it. And you're like, are you crazy? Just let him go. God, just hope he leaves us alone.
You're certainly not going to harvest anything from him if you do manage to kill it. Like, so you're just doing it out of what? Spite, revenge against a big fucking fish. I know it's not a fish. It's funnier that way.
The sailors definitely called them fish. And my figuring was that this was the movie's attempt to give Chase this character arc where he was this really ambitious whale hunter in the beginning. And he's basically, his response to getting attacked by the whale is the opposite of the famous Captain Ahab. He becomes a pacifist. He swallows all his spite, all his desire for revenge. And he's like, I can't kill whales anymore, which is a good theme, like a good arc for this character, but it's not supported by much except these little weird tacked on scenes. So it feels like a snap judgment that it wasn't really built up to.
It does feel like either Levitt or Howard trying to reconcile these men being the protagonists of the movie who are doing things that we all pretty much universally consider terrible in this day and age, but we're supposed to root for these guys. So giving him this arc makes him a little more sympathetic. But like I said, he probably just didn't want to piss the whale off.
And then just to top it off, when he gets back home, they make it so that, and he never went on a whaling expedition again. Wrong. When the reality was he went right back out and he was a whale captain the rest of his life. So like
Yeah.
more of the Hollywoodizing of the story to make him a contemporary hero that we could sympathize with.
He actually tried to invent a machine gun harpoon that would just fire harpoons rapid fire, but it wasn't practical.
Yeah.
So it didn't work out. Let's talk about one of the strongest emotional scenes in the movie, which is leaving Mr. Joy behind. By the way, I love how sailors call each other Mr. all the time.
It's neat. It's one of the fun things. Yeah.
I thought it was a pirate thing because I watched that show Black Sails and they did that on that show.
Okay.
No, they do it. I think it's just a sailor thing.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was just a thing back then. You called everyone Mr.
Maybe it's an officer thing, but he calls Mr. Nickerson, the cabin boy, Mr. too. Maybe he's just being nice. I don't know. Who knows? Why do people say things?
Indeed. That's not our realm of expertise. Yeah. So Mr. Joy, unfortunately, is in no condition to travel.
He had a nasty head wound to start with, even when they first got on the lifeboats, right?
Yeah. From the initial attack, he got a little, it was almost like a chunk of his flesh was missing from the scalp.
It looked bad.
It's pretty gnarly.
Like he got massively cracked on the head and didn't look very good. And then they're starving for weeks. So he's like, I can't, I'm just staying here in this funky old cave.
And he has a bottle of what I assume is rum in his hands.
Yes. I didn't really put that together, but his storyline is that at the very beginning, he says, I stopped drinking when he meets Zoe and Chase. And then later on, the captain tries to offer him some wine. He's like, no, I actually stopped drinking. And he's dying. So he's like, I should just hit the bottle again.
But he doesn't let Chase open it for him. I hope he had the strength to open it in his final moments.
Yes, that's a good point.
Because if you're dying of thirst and you drink alcohol, like you're going to speed the process up. It dehydrates you like crazy.
So that was maybe his way to do himself in. But yeah, he's like, no, I got it. Thanks, big strong Chris Hemsworth. And it's like, dude, it doesn't look like you got it because it's like a wax seal or something on that cork. I don't know. It did not look like with his shaky little trembly hands he was going to be able to get that cork out.
Right. You really got to get your fingernail under there and dig, kind of go in a circle around the bottle and then try to pop the top off. It's a process. I've opened many a Maker's Mark bottle in my time without a...
Oh, yeah. Those can be frustrating.
Especially when you need that drink or your hands are going to be shaking.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. That's never happened to me yet. You can cut that. So then we get to the moment, much like season 2 of Yellow Jackets, people are like, when are they going to start eating people? And it happens.
It does.
They do it in a classy way, as classy as cannibalism can be, I guess.
Did you know that was coming? Did you know enough about the story of the movie, like when you first saw it, to know that that's where this lifeboat shit is heading?
No, but I've seen enough survival stories to kind of understand the beats. And I certainly wasn't surprised when it came up, but I didn't necessarily see it coming.
Yeah, and when the captain looks over at the really sick guy and his arms turn into turkey legs, then you know like something's up here, like someone's going to be eating someone.
like a fork and knife suddenly appear in his hand. His tongue rolls out of his mouth.
Exactly. I just realized, like, do you know that's coming? Yeah, of course you do. If you grew up watching cartoons, you were indoctrinated. That was a thing that happened.
Thought you were being serious for a second, you piece of shit. Oh, yeah. One guy dies and another sailor tries to push him overboard. And Chase says, no sailor would discard that which may save him.
Yeah.
And everybody's like, oh, like we're doing that now. Nickerson, he's not happy about it, but what are you going to do?
It's good stuff for a movie because it's really awful to contemplate. It's the worst kind of dilemma. It's a choice between evils, and both things are pretty evil, starving to death and eating a guy. And yeah.
Is it weird that I don't think it's that terrible?
I don't know. Maybe you're forward thinking on that.
I'm throwing it out there. And if we ever get into some kind of podcast related disaster and you need to eat me to survive, don't even hesitate.
Okay.
I mean, wait till I'm dead, obviously. Don't sabotage me.
I'll try.
But if I'm dead, I'm just meat. Go get after it.
Thanks. That's good to know.
Yeah.
I should probably get that in writing just in case your family has any qualms later.
That goes for the listeners too, guys. You can eat me if it's just now, like if you don't need to, then just let me have a normal funeral.
Yeah, try to avoid it.
But if it comes down to it, I won't be mad. I won't haunt you or anything.
Thank you. That's nice to know. It's reassuring.
Good.
And I had to point out something about this movie. We mocked the Melville framing device. This is the first time at an hour and a half into the movie where you're like, oh, thank God they have this framing device, because old Tom Nickerson gets to describe exactly how they butchered the dead sailor's body and took all the meat off his bones and ate that and sewed him back up and gave the rest of his body a burial, which you couldn't show. It's like, you know, you're making a movie about this topic, which is really powerful, but you can't show the sailors chopping up a dude and eating him. There's just no way. So they had to have somebody to narrate it for you at that point.
Unlike Yellow Jackets season 2.
Okay. Maybe you can show it.
The only other way you could have gotten it across is if the other boat was close to them and you just see the other boat watching them like, what the fuck?
What are they eating over there? Where did they get ribs?
Yeah, it smells like pork chops. Yeah, so they must have ate them raw, right? Because they're not making a fire.
I don't think they were making fires.
Do what you got to do. That makes it worse, though.
Yeah.
Raw human meat, like it doesn't even taste good now.
No. And I think did this happen in the movie or was this in the book? I think they actually ate the liver and the kidneys for some reason and couldn't deal with the muscle meat because it was too stringy.
I think, yeah, that does come up in the movie too. He says we ate the heart first and then goes through the organs and the order they ate them.
Okay. It's good stuff. And Brendan Gleeson breaks down because this is the whole reason he hasn't told anybody his story, because he's so traumatized and shamed by this horrible sin that he committed. And this is one of the spots in the movie where Gleeson gets to be good. He breaks down while telling this story and you go, oh yeah, that's Brendan Gleeson, the good actor that I know.
Yeah, he makes that section work. I'm not sure that Fairley and Whishaw ever make anything work in the framing section. Unfortunately, they're pretty rough in that. I'm sorry to say too, she kind of spoils it because he's like, she fucking ruins it.
He's like, I've never told anyone this before. Please don't tell my wife. And then the wife pops out of the shadows. She's like, I heard it all and I still love you. And it's like a really corny moment.
Good for him that she never read Chase's book.
I know. She went 30 years without ever hearing the actual story of what happened.
4 months after they got home, the whole thing was there for the reading. I don't know if Chase brought that part up. I assume he did. It's a pretty big part of the story.
I think he glossed over a little bit. I think he actually gave Pollard a break on the decision to steer into the squall at the beginning. He was like, yeah, that was not a big deal. We just fixed the ship and we were fine. But I think he did admit to gnawing on some bones here and there.
Having some noms.
Man noms.
So now they're back on the ocean trying to get home and they're starving. And this is a way, I already spoke about a way that the movie was similar to Reign of Fire. Now let's talk about a way in which it's different from Reign of Fire, which is what was a big complaint I had during Reign of Fire is that we're supposed to believe these people are starving. They're all these jacked muscular dudes and nobody seems like tired or lethargic. Like they're all pretty gung-ho. So I was like, they didn't sell that any of these people were starving or you know, didn't have enough food. In the Heart of the Sea does not have that problem because we spend basically 40 minutes just watching dudes starve to death.
They're fucked up. They look worse and worse. You mentioned that they did actually have the actors on a calorie restricted diet.
600 calories a day for a guy the size of Chris Hemsworth is nuts.
He must have been really starving. Not Owen Chase starving.
He did have a quote that was like, in some small way, it made it feel like we were doing justice to them. I was like, shut up, dude. Get out of here.
But yeah, at least he knew what it felt like to be hungry. And he lost 30 pounds or something.
40 pounds, yeah. Tom Holland actually wasn't allowed to lose weight more. Like he wasn't allowed to lose any more weight during production because he was underaged.
Okay. He was a minor.
So he lost all his weight pre-production, I think. So he showed up super skinny. And he said, actually, he was so hungry one day, he stole, like the cast craft services table was full of, I don't know, celery.
Probably.
But he went to the crew craft services table and stole a croissant because he was so hungry and he ate it and then threw it up because his body didn't know how to digest butter and sugar anymore.
Damn. So that's as actors go. They went for it and they look good. Like, I don't know how much CGI was on top of Chris Hemsworth to make him look more like a zombie, but he looks quite like a zombie and I thought it looked pretty cool and convincing to sell it. Tom Holland, I thought looked a little bit more like Michael Jackson in the Thriller video. Something about the dark circles in his hair.
Yeah, he's got kind of, because he's the only one that doesn't grow a big beard because his character hasn't gone through puberty.
Oh, right. Yes.
So he's just got this big hair that's all sun-beaten and dead. And then his clean-shaven, sunken eyes, face is pretty horrifying to look at.
Yeah.
What about the inquest? Do we want to talk about that at all? It was pretty Hollywood, but is that how it went down?
I don't remember if that's in the book. I'm halfway through rereading the Philbrick book. It's a believable concept. These guys we can't have the idea that whales fight back catch on because that'll ruin our industry. But you know what? Their industry has been going for 100 years. So are people just realizing what whales do and don't do? It's worked. They're still profitable despite the time that's passed. So it felt like a little bit overblown, this idea that, this would destroy our industry. You can't tell anybody.
We also already confirmed that Chase in the movie becomes a merchant captain, which is not true. He became a whaling captain and went whaling till the end of his days. Do you know what happened to Pollard in real life?
The story they tell about Pollard is almost true. So in the movie they go, he went on one other whaling voyage and that ship ran aground in Hawaii and then he had to hang it up. He wasn't a captain anymore. What they changed was he went on 2 more voyages and he lost both ships.
Maybe he's not a great captain.
I feel like if you tell the audience that it happened 2 more times, it falls into the realm of comedy.
Right. It's the rule of threes.
Yeah. It starts to sound ridiculous that this guy tried 3 times to be a whaling captain, lost all 3 boats, and then he became the night watchman of Nantucket, and that was his job.
But who watched him?
That's true.
That's a good question, right?
Probably Rorschach.
I like his mask. Why does it have a picture of my parents fighting on it? That's in the Heart of the Sea, right?
Yeah.
We're about about done.
I think so.
Let's check in on the peeps. We've already covered Ron Howard, kinda. I guess we give him like a half credit for Solo.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Is he credited on Solo? I forgot.
He is the credited director on Solo, I'm pretty sure. So Gareth Edwards kept his credit on Rogue One, even though Tony Gilroy came in and finished that for him.
I see.
But I think in Solo, enough was redone where Howard took the credit from Lord and Miller. But this was the first movie he made after Rush, which I think is about race car drivers. I never saw it, but that was a hit for him and Hemsworth. And then he followed this up with a fucking garbage ass Dan Brown adaptation, Inferno.
Weird.
Remember those stupid ass movies with Tom Hanks and his dumbass wig?
I mean, I do, but I only kind of remember the first one. This is like, feels like decades later.
Yeah, this was the third one. They finally did away with the stupid wig. He just got regular Tom Hanks hair in it, but fuck those movies. And then he followed Inferno up with Solo. Feel free to go back and listen to that one if you want
please
to.
Do.
And then he adapted Giant Toddler, J.D. Vance's Hillbilly Elegy after that, which was a bad movie.
Yeah,
but,
everybody hated that. I didn't try to watch it.
Fuck that movie. I think I watched like half an hour of it and said this isn't for me. And then he directed 13 Lives based on the, the Thai cave rescue. And that came out in 2022 and it got really good reviews. It has a great cast too. I've been meaning to check it out. It went directly to Amazon Prime.
Oh yeah, that's got like Vigo and some other.
Is our boy Joel in that too?
He could be. I remember it being a good cast, but even with that, not enough to make me want to watch it because First of all, it just seems tragic and terrible. And second of all, being trapped in an underwater cave is just like absolute peak nightmare shit for me. So I just don't want to see that.
I assume you've never seen The Descent, right?
I have not. I've heard good things, but I'm scared.
You've heard good things about how fucking terrifying it is. Yeah,
exactly.
It's a scary ass movie. Really good movie though. But yeah, so he's working on The Shrinking of Treehorn, which is a computer animated movie that's going to be going straight to Netflix now.
Oh, Treehorn. I like the sound of that.
Yeah. Charles Levitt was also the writer of Warcraft, you'll remember.
Yes. Interesting pairing of movies.
I can kind of see some parallels between them, but I don't care enough to explore them. But he's written some good stuff. He wrote Blood Diamond. He wrote some decent stuff like Those Who Wish Me Dead, which is his last movie, but he wrote some crap like K-Pax too. So mixed bag with Mr. Levitt. K-Pax sucks. Yeah. Okay. But we've got to talk about the Thor in the Room because this is now officially our 5th Chris Hemsworth movie and probably the 4th that he has starred in. You could argue Ghostbusters wasn't really his movie.
He had a fun little character.
Maybe Cabin in the Woods. He's not the star necessarily, but he's certainly the star of this.
He's close to the star in Cabin in the Woods, or he's the fake out star. He's the guy you think is supposed to be the star until he gets knocked off.
But he was the star of this. Oh, you know what? I guess he wasn't the star in El Royale either. So he was kind of the boogeyman in El Royale. He only pops up at the end.
He was the boogeyman in that, yeah. But we liked him in all that stuff, right? We're definitely not indicting Chris Hemsworth for bringing down a bunch of movies.
No, the only movie I would say that we've covered that he was bad in, or at least not a net positive in, was Red Dawn.
Yeah.
But that was just a clusterfuck of a movie anyway. So unfortunately, we've talked about him pretty recently. Not much has changed. Extraction 2, I think, came out in the meantime. Was pretty well received. Furiosa is in post-production now, and it'll be out in 2024. He's playing the young Immortan Joe.
Yeah, big hopes pinned on that one. I hope that turns out good.
That's good casting. I could see him as a young Immortan Joe very easily. Kind of reminds me of his character in El Royale, actually.
Yeah, I like the idea that he gets to be more weird. I'd like a weird Hemsworth.
And then he's also going to be the voice of Optimus Prime in a new Transformers movie, also set for 2024. These are no longer under the banner of Michael Bay, by the way. Like, they've been getting better now.
Oh, okay. Interesting. That'll be interesting. It does seem fitting.
He's got that nice baritone. I could see it working out. But
yeah,
interestingly, we've got more movies we could choose from of his. Oh. He could be the first actor to hit double digits in the Blast Zone.
Yikes.
Even before our buddy Keith David, because he's got The Huntsman, Winter's War, Black Hat, Men in Black International, and A Perfect Getaway are all Chris Hemsworth starring movies that are up for the Blast Zone.
Man, we're going to have to spread these out so we don't wear people out on Chris Hemsworth, thread him through many years of Blast Zone podcasting.
Yeah, I think we'll give him a little break, at least a few months off from the zone. But what can we say? We like him as an actor. We end up picking his movies a lot.
Yeah.
Benjamin Walker, like we mentioned, surprisingly a stand-up comedian, but also done some acting. He was the titular role in Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter.
Oh, I never saw that one.
Neither did I, but definitely a future episode. Lost a bunch of money.
Okay, cool.
He was in the underrated neo-noir thriller Shimmer Lake in 2017. That went to Netflix. Check that out if you haven't seen it, if you like that type of stuff. He was in the 3rd season of Jessica Jones as Eric Geldin, aka Mindwave, if you're familiar with your Marvel villains.
I'm not that familiar, but that Sounds fun. I liked the early Jessica Jones that I did see.
Yeah, I actually think I skipped the third season, but I like the first two, especially the first season with David Tennant. And he's currently starring on The Rings of Power as Gil-galad. He's got kind of an elven look to him. I could see that.
He does. That's the only one thing that I recognize his face from when I read that. I'm like, oh yeah, that's the elf dude.
And Cillian Murphy doesn't need much of an introduction. He's one of Hollywood's biggest stars now after leading the billion-dollar Oppenheimer.
You wouldn't think that a historical biopic about Oppenheimer would drive him to the top the way it did, but good for him. He's a talented actor.
He become death.
Yeah.
Good for him. But he's been in some big movies besides that. He was in Dunkirk, more of a cameo though, I guess, in Dunkirk. He had a big role in A Quiet Place Part 2, and he's producing and starring in a historical drama called Small Things Like These, which takes place in 1985 in Ireland. So he'll actually get to be Irish in a movie.
Oh, nice.
He doesn't do that often. He's obviously also a big star due to the success of Peaky Blinders. Peaky Fucking Blinders.
Yeah, which I never got into, but I feel like one day I'm going to come around and get really into that show.
I think I did like a season and a half of it. It's good, but it's just like British Sons of Anarchy without the motorcycle. Like, it's kind of repetitive and it's not the most imaginative. Like, I love a good crime drama, but if you watch enough of them, Peaky Blinders is kind of paint by numbers.
Okay. Oh, Small Things Like These. I just remember what that was. I just read that book.
Oh, really?
Yeah, coincidentally, it like came up because it's a very highly regarded novel. Really cool. Now I'm super excited to see Cillian play that role. It's this very subtle little story. Really subtle and small, but powerful at the same time. I won't say any more than that.
So there's not like surprise murders or anything like, oh, don't say anything about the movie.
There's very few giant sperm whales. It's just really about like life in Ireland.
All right, cool. I'll definitely check that out. I'll watch just about anything with Cillian in it.
Yeah.
I first noticed him, I think, in Red Eye, which was a really underrated little thriller on a plane. If you guys like Cillian Murphy and don't remember ever seeing Red Eye, highly recommend that one.
And we had him in the zone for Sunshine. Did you mention that?
I didn't know. You're right. I forgot.
Yeah.
Sunshine was a while ago, but that's one of my favorite episodes.
Cool movie, cool part.
Because also one of my favorite movies. Yeah, love that movie. Visually incredible movie.
Yeah.
Tom Holland is, of course, Spider-Man, and he's been in some good stuff besides that. He was in The Lost City of Z, which was pretty much universally liked. He was in The Devil All the Time, which I think was a little more mixed, but I enjoyed.
Yeah, I did too.
He's had some trouble, though, finding success outside of the MCU because Cherry, we remember, was not very warmly received.
No.
Chaos Walking, which I know was filmed years ago and just released maybe in 2020, was a real pile of dog shit, pardon my expression. And then The Crowded Room was that show I was just talking about. They all got pretty bad reviews.
Okay.
And Uncharted made some money, but it wasn't reviewed well, and it didn't make a ton of money, so it's still kind of in limbo if we're going to get another one of those. I hated his casting as Nathan Drake, and I hated Mark Wahlberg as Sully even more. That was mind-boggling why they would go that route.
I was just about to say I was like kind of just lukewarm and okay with that movie, but I had no experience with the game, so I had no attachment of what these characters should be.
Look, I'm very attached to those games because the protagonist's name is Nathan Drake. What's my name? Jonathan Drake. Literally 2 letters off.
Yeah.
It could have been me.
They need to respect you, which I guess they did not.
I mean, the character of Nathan Drake was like pretty clearly modeled after Nathan Fillion, who's just by the time the movie was getting made was too old. So I understand they couldn't go to him, but pictured kind of a guy in like his mid 30s, early 40s, maybe like even Josh Duhamel from a couple years ago could have pulled it off. I think not Tom Holland. I don't know what their reasoning was behind that. I guess because he's a star, but it seems like Spider-Man's a star, not Tom Holland, is kind of what I've gathered from his career outside of the MCU.
But yet amidst all that and his celebrity relationship, he still comes across as likable. He hasn't turned into like a guy that you love to hate because he's just like a Hollywood pretty boy. He's just, cool guy.
Yeah, not at all. Personally, he seems like a lovely guy. I've got nothing against him, but I just hope he finds his lane because I think he's done playing Spider-Man. I know there was rumors that there were negotiations happening.
Okay.
But I'd love to see him spread his wings a little bit and have some fun. But some exciting news. We're taking a week off next week. That's not the exciting part. It's obviously a bummer.
We'll miss you guys.
We'll miss you. But what does that mean? It means the next episode you guys are getting is the kickoff for Blastober.
Oh my God, I'm scared already.
It's going to get spooky. It's going to get scary. It's going to get creepy. It's going to get crawly.
Chills down my spine.
We're going to get the old Blastober theme music out of the vault.
Yes,
we're going to dust off our pumpkin logo. It's going to be a blast. No pun intended.
Every pun intended.
But we're not going to announce the movies ahead of time for Blastober anymore. We decided we're going to keep a little mystery because what's a good element of a horror movie? Some mystery.
Exactly.
What's going on? Who's the killer?
I'm feeling the suspense already because I think you told me the movies, but I don't remember these things. So they're going to frighten me when they pop out of my closet late at night and say, watch me for next week.
So yeah, 2 weeks from today, the first episode of Blastober will be live. So tune in, get cozy under the covers, And you know how you cover your eyes kind of when you watch a scary movie, just cover your ears a little.
Oh, is that what you do on a scary podcast?
Yeah,
Like,
you got to cover your ears.
put your hand over your ear and kind of listen past it.
Exactly. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. Please remember to rate and review the podcast if you can. Subscribe to the pod. Tell your friends about the pod. You know, word of mouth is a strong tool.
That would be so sweet.
We would really appreciate it. The more listeners we get, hopefully the more cool stuff we can do. You can email us if you have any suggestions for movies, any feedback, fun facts, tidbits. We're blastzonepod@gmail.com. And you can follow us on Twitter still. Still Twitter.
Still happening.
Blastzonepod is our @ So give us a follow there. We're still posting stuff on there.
Yeah, we have fun there.
We're tweeting stuff. We'll never call it X.
Never.
And we'll see you next time in the Blast Zone.
See you next time in the Blast Zone.
Blast Zone.